What's up everyone? Welcome to my new tutorial series. Oh yes, I'm very excited about this. Most of you who have checked out my videos in the past, you folks know that I do some videos on talks that I've done at places like CancelCon, and I also do a lot of time lapses without any voiceovers, just showing my process as I work through paintings. But today I've got kind of a time lapse of a much larger painting that I've actually kind of created a tutorial of sorts out of, and I'm very excited to dive into it. And not only is this a tutorial for digital painting, it is part one of a 4-part series that I'm going to do called Getting the Most Out of Your Work. Essentially what I am trying to help you folks with, and in turn help myself with, is not just creating a painting that I can then post on social media and then doing nothing with it. I notice that I do that a lot, where I make a painting and I put it on Instagram or I put it on Twitter, and it just sits there and I wait. You know, I wait for people to like it or to retweet it, and then I don't know really where to go after that. So we're going to be creating a painting of an original character of mine named Knox. Some of you may have heard of him before, and if you haven't, he is a very vampiric looking, spooky fellow, and I think it's perfect for October, for Halloween time. And we're going to go into illustrating him, things that I keep in mind during my illustration process, what I am using for creating my illustrations, and the steps that I like to take. And then we're going to be diving into 3 more videos after this one, going along the lines of taking that painting then and making some really fabulous graphics for social media. So I'm not just posting the painting like there it is, there it goes, but we're going to be doing some branding for Instagram posts, for Instagram stories. We are going to be making some really cool promotional graphics for Twitter and for Facebook, for posting online, just to kind of make your project look a little more enticing, get a little more bang for your buck. There, we're going to be going into, after that, a specific video tutorial on video editing. So we're going to take the footage of the time lapse that I create from today, and I am going to design a YouTube thumbnail and then show you how I edit my videos and post time lapses onto YouTube. So after people have seen your project, they can get in and actually watch how you create it, which is a lot of fun. And then after that, we're going to take the image that we created and we're going to actually animate it. So not just making a time lapse of the video process, but we are going to take the painting itself and we're going to add some cool animations, elements kind of hovering around and floating around. We're going to throw some music on it and everything so that you have a cool promotional piece that you can post to a lot of different social media outlets that is more than just a static image. It's something a lot more interesting and cool to take in. So getting the most out of your work in as many ways as I can. Oh, and also in this design process, I'll be talking about what I keep in mind when it comes to possibly transforming this painting into merchandise in the future. So not just, you know, making a print or something like that, but what I keep in mind when I'm like, maybe I want to make this a sticker in the future. Maybe I want to make this a button. Maybe I want to put this on a t-shirt, stuff like that. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So before we jump into the painting for today, I'm going to dive into the MSI Creator Center because I'm using the MSI Creator 15 for my painting today. And you can see all of my apps that I use for work are listed in the priority section on the right hand side, so that when I use this laptop I'm actually getting the best performance possible, because as I'm opening these apps and using them, they're being set to priority as I'm creating. You can also jump into the true color settings here to make sure it's set to Adobe RGB 100%. And I can also set it to the blue light settings or the office settings, or customize any visual aspects of my display as I see fit while I'm creating. So I'm going to start out this piece with doing a handful of thumbnails. Thumbnailing is a really fabulous way to kind of get your illustration ideas down on the canvas and ensure that you are creating the coolest version of your idea. I've got this idea here for one of my main characters by the name of Knox, and he's kind of like centered in the middle of my canvas, surrounded by moon and stars. I think it would be pretty cool maybe to put some clouds and things behind them. You can see kind of the idea that's coming together here. And it's a really good way also to kind of get the gunk out of the tube, so to speak. So I'm sitting down, I'm probably illustrating for the very first time as I jump into creating this idea, and I'm starting to get these sketches down, no matter how unfinished and no matter how bad, quote unquote, they could be at first. I'm just getting these ideas down, and then I'm going to choose the one that I feel the most confident about. I'm going to choose the one labeled number 1 for this piece. I'm going to grab that sketch and bring it into my main canvas, and then I'm going to start kind of solidifying the initial concept. And what I do for this beginning process is I take that sketch and I basically just keep turning sketches above it on a lower opacity until I can create like a pretty decent line art. My line art typically isn't 100% perfect. I don't like to make my lines so perfectly clean that I kind of block myself into one very specific concept and way that I'm going to be illustrating something. I tend to make it a little loose so long as I have my basic idea down on the canvas, and that's good enough for me. You folks may like to create your line art in a way that is very solidified and very specific, if that is your style. But if you are new to illustration and you're worried about maybe not having that initial sketch looking perfect, fear not. It's not something that has to look perfect 100%. It's just kind of getting it to the point where you can understand what you're working on and you know how to take it to the next level. So I've got his face kind of painted in here, and I'm adding a little more details to the eyes. I'm going to start putting in some hair and things like that. And I basically do this several times until I'm satisfied with the final product. And one of the things that I'm keeping in mind here as I'm going along is I am making sure that my concept, number 1, is coming to life the way that I want, and number 2, I'm making sure that the silhouette of what I'm working with is pretty understandable. If you're starting out in this first initial step and your silhouette cannot be read without all of the details, you can't tell, like in this case, this is going to be a person with a moon behind it, it's not really reading, well, then you maybe need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that everything is dynamic and understandable. I'm also, during this part, going to be flipping my canvas back and forth, which is a really fabulous way to kind of see your painting with fresh eyes. It's the equivalent of taking a step back from your work and coming back with fresh eyes to see all of the issues and problems maybe your piece has, but doing it instantly. And I'm going to show you how to set up a pretty easy way to flip the canvas during your work flow.
Edit keyboard shortcuts and find image in that drop-down menu. Expand it and then search for flip canvas horizontal and set the shortcut you prefer.
So I've got the basic sketch again here. I'm kind of mapping out more on the block out points of where the muscles in his face are and everything, and it still doesn't look 100% perfect. It's not like I'm creating a perfect face here. I'm just getting in all of the major points that I know that this piece has to have. And then I will start to work on the painting a little bit more. The next step is going to be kind of illustrating and painting in more of the blocked out shapes and all that good stuff after I make sure that I know where his jacket collar is going to be, for instance, where his hair is coming together, and all that good stuff. Make sure his facial expression is how I need. So here's where I'm kind of blocking out the silhouette. I can tell what this is. It's like a person's bust. I'm kind of cleaning it up so that I can see the head and the hair and the shape of his shoulders. adding the moon in the back and kind of cutting a portion out of it so it's like a crescent moon. And I'm also making sure, if you notice where that moon is, it was kind of encroaching upon his ear a little bit, and I made the choice to either have the moon not touching his ear at all or have the moon behind a portion of his ear so that there's no tangent between the tip of the ear, just, you know, barely brushing the end of that moon there. And now I'm working more with the silhouette, just making sure it reads pretty well. After I'm done with that, I can come in and start blocking in the basic values and kind of bringing the sketch into a 3D space. I'm going along with kind of my standard for building up a 3D face, or that's just how I think of it, like, you know, going from something flat into a more solid painted style, just so I can start to understand it in a 3D space rather than be looking at a flat illustration. And then I'm going to come in and start making the lighting situation a little more interesting. Since he's going to have a moon silhouetted behind him, the center of his face is going to be a little darker than the rest, and so I can really come in and start to add, you know, those contrasting highlights on the side of his face. I'm flipping my canvas a little bit more, trying to make sure everything looks relatively all right, and I'm just going to start detailing this the way that I want. I can really start to get seriously into painting each element in my project here because I spent so much time kind of prepping that thumbnail and making sure my silhouette reads. I don't really have any worry or fear at this point in my painting of what it's going to become. There's a little bit up in the air as far as the colors I may use, because I do like to go from grayscale into color, and I do that because if you're like me and maybe you aren't, you know, you don't start every single painting out with a surefire set of colors to work with. You like to leave it a little more up into interpretation as you go into your painting. This is a really great way just to focus on what you're actually illustrating instead of also trying to figure out what colors you're going to use and how those colors work together while you're putting the painting together. Another thing that I'm going to start keeping in mind going forward here is painting different materials in different ways. So I'm kind of blocking in all of the lighting and everything here, trying to make sure that it looks believable. But as I get through this process, I'm starting to think about, well, how am I going to render his skin? How am I going to render his hair? When I bring our moon element back in to this piece, how am I going to make that look different than his hair and his skin so not everything is muddy and kind of bleeding in together? It's also a fantastic way to keep an eye on all of my values in the painting. If you've ever started an illustration or a painting and you've thought to yourself, you know, there's something wrong here with this painting, but I can't really put my finger on what exactly it is. A lot of times it's your values. If your values, meaning like the grayscale elements, you know, between white and black, if they're skewed a little bit, you won't really notice it if you are either painting in color, or maybe you're not used to painting in color. Maybe you're not 100% skilled in that aspect of painting yet. And your brain is registering different colors and different shades within your painting, but not necessarily which values are working well together. This allows me to make sure that I have a really nice contrast between all the different elements of my painting before I start adding color. And then once the color gets put into my piece, I only have to continue to adhere to those values and things that I began to keep everything looking dynamic. Another thing when it comes to painting, which I will jump into here shortly as I start to add color, is I've got a really nifty trick when it comes to working with color and switching back into your values. A lot of people will add like a color layer of black or white on top of all of the painted layers in their piece, but I actually have a really fabulous trick for creating a hotkey for that, which I will show you right quick because you're going to see me start to use this here, and it's really, really fun.
So you want to go to View, Proof Setup, and then Custom, and set Device to Simulate to Working Gray Dot Gain 20%, so you can toggle between grayscale and color with Control Y.
Now I'm starting to add some gradient maps here. It's a really great way to add some basic color to your piece real quick without having to kind of glom on a bunch of different areas of paint with blending modes right at first. It's something that I used to do, but once I got a little more comfortable with gradient maps, I started doing that and then going into each element of the portrait that I'm painting and playing with the blending modes in smaller areas. This allows me to add several different colors. So I've got some blues and I've got like some greens and some yellows and stuff going there to kind of make it look like he has maybe got like pale or bluish skin, and then there's kind of light hitting him on the sides of his face, which I like pretty well. I'm also going to come in here and use clipping masks to add some texture to the moon there. You can see I've added texture only to the borders of that moon, and what I did there was I added some texture, made that texture a clipping mask so it only adheres to the borders of the moon shape that I created. And now I'm going in and adding some red color in the areas of the face where you would have more red, around the eyes, around the nose, around the mouth, and all that, and starting to drop in some more final colors to really bring some of the skin tone and things to life. And now I'm painting also directly in color. So where before I was maybe using some colors and then throwing those on blending modes after I added in colors with the gradient maps, now I'm kind of sampling colors from all around the piece and starting to see how they might work together. I'm experimenting with some colors in the eyes, kind of adding some pieces of, little pops of light to see if I can make them look a little more realistic. Even though my style isn't necessarily realism, I would call it maybe more semi-realism, but I can still kind of get those little points in there to make it register more as a real person. Kind of adding some more blues and purples and hints of maybe blood under the skin, so to speak, right here. And changing up the color of the background. I think I'm going to go with kind of a darker color so that everything that is essentially the focal point of what I want people to look at is brighter and in contrast with the background. I'm not going to be adding a lot of crazy background elements for this because I want to make sure that the focal point is obvious, and I'm going to be, like I said previously, I'm going to be trying to also brand this as possibly some kind of merch in the future. If I make it so that the background isn't crazy busy, then I can put this on a sticker, I can put this on a t-shirt and whatnot. And I can also come in and maybe have an easier time animating this if all of the elements are isolated and the background isn't too busy. I also have employed the viewing the values technique here. You can see I'm painting in black and white again, but I'm not actually losing the color. You can see how I switch back and forth into color with that awesome hotkey trick with the Control Y. going in and out of the working gray dot gain 20% so that I can see my values, but I can also continue to paint with the color that I have jotted down. Now, something to keep in mind while you're doing this is that you want to sample values from specific points in the piece and continue to check that you are using the proper colors, because if I sample a super bright color from one side of the painting and try to bring that light value to another side, I may be bringing like a really bright blue to paint in a portion of the painting that's supposed to be predominantly yellow, or some example like that. So I do keep going back into color to make sure that my colors are where they're supposed to be, and I'm not deviating from the path of the colors that I had chosen. So now I can kind of paint in color once again and just look at the colors, because I have cleaned up some of the values. I've kind of softened his face a little bit, and I'm going to start adding some more definition to his forehead and bring some of that light into the center of his face a little bit, and then darken the areas where it needs to be dark. I'm still flipping my canvas because as I go along here, I want to make sure that I don't get so comfortable looking at my painting the way that it is, that the problems and issues with the position of the face become familiar, and it starts to get painted in a way that's a little unnatural, or as unnatural as a strange vampire looking man can seem. One of the things I'd like to point out here when it comes to working on the laptop from MSI, the Creator 15, is that it does have a true pixel display. So what that means is it's delivering true to life images at 4K resolution if that's what I desire. It's got Adobe RGB 100% color gamut. It's got a verification from CalMan, which is amazing. And basically, I know that whenever I'm working with this laptop, everything that I'm seeing as I paint it and create it is going to turn out exactly that way. So there's no more of like checking my painting on multiple devices to make sure that things aren't too dark or too bright or too oversaturated. I never have that worry that I'm going to post it to social media, and then when somebody previews it, someone's going to be like, this is really dark, like I can't see certain things in it. That's happened to me before because my monitors over the years are not always meant to be art monitors, if you catch what I mean here. Like, you know, I got the monitors that I could afford at the time, and that's what I used. But this monitor here is 100% for creators, for painters, for designers. I have a lot of confidence when I work on this laptop because I know that everything I'm seeing and creating is going to be presented to my viewers and people who consume my art exactly as I intend. One of the next things that I'm going to start doing here is kind of working on the hair a little bit. I'm going to be changing the colors and adding a little more texture to it so it starts to look a little bit more like hair and less like I just scribbled over his head with a dark color, which is exactly what I've done up to this point. And this kind of harkens back to what I talked about earlier, where as you're starting to paint your piece, you want to make sure that you're also keeping in mind different textures. You don't want to be rendering your skin and your hair and your clothing and your background elements exactly the same way, because then things tend to look a little flat. And it kind of depends on your style as well. Some people have a style where everything looks super shiny and glossy. Some people have a style where everything looks textury. A lot of my elements in my pieces can sometimes look a little bit different, or sometimes look like they're painted very similarly because I use a lot of similar brushes, but at least in this instance I did actually choose some very different brushes in order to get a little bit of a different kind of texture. I'm starting to add in very specific kind of strands of hair here so things look a little bit different and kind of develop this flowing hair vibe. you know, so his hair is like hanging down onto his shoulders. I'm kind of experimenting with where I can place this over his shoulders. Does it overlap his collar? Does it just come down in front of his face? I'm adding a little bit of light elements so that it looks like the hair is interacting with the moonlight around him. And I'm still flipping my canvas because I still want to make sure that I'm making everything look as well as I can make it. I don't want to start getting so comfortable looking at my piece in one position that I start to skew it, which I have a tendency to do. And I think that that's true for a lot of us. I do have a tendency to skew things over. As you can see here, I am checking the shape of my face to kind of keep him symmetrical. And so I've kind of mirrored the shape of his jaw and started to fill it in on that other side, just to keep everything smooth and as accurate as possible. Another thing I want to talk about, because I've made a lot of points here about general best practices when it comes to actually illustrating, but I feel compelled to also talk about your mental headspace when you're working here, not just your digital workspace while you're creating. I did this painting in a lot of different rooms in my house while I was in the process of creating the content for this video, because since I was working on a laptop, I really could just like kind of go anywhere, and I frequently get a little stuck in my own head when I'm working in the same workspace day after day. So being able to do this project on the Creator 15 was awesome because the portability is fabulous on this. I just have my tablet and my laptop, and I kind of curled up on the couch just to keep my mind clear, so I'm not, you know, sitting stagnant in the same place for the hours it took me to create this. But it's also got a really awesome battery life, so I wasn't like lugging around a bunch of cords and things while I was working on this project, and it was really nice. It helped to kind of keep my head clear, kind of introduce me into a new space while I was creating, and it was very nice. Now I'm going to start kind of adding the seriously fine details to the end of this piece, because it's starting to come to a close and I've really got kind of the meat of this project done, but I do want to come in and add a little more detail to the edge of his hair, kind of add some more fine details to little strands hanging out in places, and I also want to start to center him in this composition a little bit better, because I have a cool thing drawn here, but the bottom portion of my character is looking a little unfinished, and I do want to add like his eyes, like I'm doing now, kind of bring some of those details back in a little bit. Even though I do want them a little hazy, I still want some of his pupils showing. I'm going to start adding some smaller details like eyelashes and eye color and all that good stuff. And I'm going to tweak the composition so that, like I said previously, I can put this on a t-shirt. I can animate this really nicely. I can put it on a sticker, you know, whatever it is that I choose. So I'm kind of creating some masks here to mask out the bottom of the character bust, just to make it really nice and round, and I'm adding a little more hair details. Then what I'm going to try and do is line him up a little more with the bottom of the moon, because if I'm going to round him out, I might as well kind of center that and align it with the background shape, since they're so similar, and that gives me will give me a really nice shape to kind of put on future projects, you know, so there's no strange die cut that I really have to do. I can just put it in a circle. So I'm going to pull it out here like so and make sure the edge of my character kind of matches up with that. That looks pretty good. And then I am going to create a nice shape and go ahead and mask that into its proper space, like so. Just make sure everything is kind of centered in its proper area. And then if I decide I want to change the background or something, I can do that. Now I'm kind of going back to, and you can see like my sketch, my original sketch kind of popping up in the background there. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at my original concept, where I had like the stars and moons as part of the picture, and I am starting to add in those elements to see if they work. And what I found here actually was that when I added in the stars and the cloud shapes in the background, is that it didn't really look as great as I thought it would. You know, once the original or the initial piece was finished, the stars actually seemed a little bit comical there in just a static image. I think what I will end up doing in future videos is actually bring the stars back for part of the animation, because I can make them hover up and down and make them glow and things. But I kind of feel like in just the illustration, you know, the flat static illustration portion of this project, they're a little comical and a little childish compared to like the more serious painting of our character. So I noodle with them a little bit here, and then I pull up my sketch again and kind of look, and I start putting in these cloud shapes like how I had sketched them. And once I color them in and get them in, I feel the same way as I felt about the stars. Like, they're really cool, it looks really neat, but the overall presentation with all of these things is not that great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end up removing them, but I am going to jump into Illustrator, and I'm going to create myself a really cool freeform gradient to kind of overlay over the top of my piece. I'm kind of messing with some purples and some greens and some dark tones here, because I want to create kind of a cool spooky vibe to overlay. And this is also really cool because I'm working on this laptop portably, and I've got two files open as I'm creating some pretty large scale images, and it's working very, very well. One of the main things that, like I said earlier, there's, you know, I love this laptop for a lot of different reasons, color being one of them, but another reason is that you can really multitask between a lot of different apps on this computer without any lag, without any worry that you know, your laptop is going to become overheated, or your system is just going to find it too much to handle. And so it's been really nice being able to go through all of the different apps that I might use on a desktop computer, just, you know, with my laptop that's sitting in my lap. The next thing I tried to do here is see what it would look like if I added some more realistic looking clouds, which I kind of left them in the piece just to kind of see how it looked moving forward, and focus more on the composition, kind of creating this circular shape for like the borders of a sticker or a button or whatnot. But I ended up not really liking them that much. So the next thing I do is I just do one more final pass of color, kind of going through. I actually use a lot of the auto tone and all of that in the image section, and I use a lot of the curves and levels to try and kind of solidify the harmony between colors in my piece. And then what I'm going to do quickly is add a little more detail to the moon. And I'm using a completely different brush here so that it doesn't look too much like the way I painted everything else in the painting, just to give the moon itself a little more dynamic color and texture. I'm going to start overlaying some images that I'm dragging in from my libraries just to give it even more grit. And then I'm going to kind of block out some of that just to keep it a little bit glowy. And then I'll start adding some details to the edges after I color correct just a little bit. So I'm going in now and kind of subtracting from the edges of the moon where I've got these interesting craters coming out, just to kind of break the monotony of like this perfect circle. It's still circular, you know, because I like that vibe, but it also has a little bit of texture to the outside of that moon. I'm adding some very, very basic details to the hair here. I'm going to try and add in a little bit of light to the edge of his jacket collar, and some light on those ears, a little bit of light in strands kind of poking out from the side of his head, because I don't want his hair to be lost in the darkness that is behind the moon. I want it to pop just a little bit, and you can do that fairly easy with just some teeny tiny hints of light, which I'm going to add, kind of like I'm adding some light to the eyes and stuff here. Go, adding some little drops of light in the eyes, kind of making it a little more purpley so it goes with the rest of the piece. I will add some eyelashes just to give it a little more depth, and I will start kind of chiseling out some more of the hair in his brows. And then adding some stray hairs around the hair that I've painted, so it just looks a little more like he has hair, and it's not just like a Lego man hairdo that's just snapped on top of his head and everything is perfect except for these flowing pieces down here on his collar. So I'm kind of like adding some more body to that, and making it look more like they're separate strands of hair. And there we have it. So that is our piece. Thank you all so much for joining me today and watching this video on digital illustration. I hope some of these tips and tricks helped you in your own process and your own art journey. And please stay on the lookout for the next few videos that are coming out, because like I said, we are going to be taking this into the realm of graphic design next. We're going to be diving into some cool video editing and then animating it. It's going to be a lot of fun.